Stop reading Marcus Aurelius like he was some ancient guy who had it all figured out. He didn't. He buried children. He ruled an empire during a plague that killed thousands a day. He marched into wars he never wanted to fight. And every night, alone, exhausted, he picked up a pen and wrote himself notes that nobody else was ever supposed to read. That's what Meditations actually is. It's not a book he wrote for you. It's a man at war with his own mind, trying to survive himself. And that's exactly why it still works 2,000 years later. Lesson 1. The obstacle is never the real problem. Your reaction to it is. There's a line in Meditations that gets quoted everywhere, printed on posters, tattooed on forearms, and almost nobody understands what it actually means. He wrote that the impediment to action advances action, that what stands in the way becomes the way. People hear that and think it means stay positive, find the silver lining. That is not what he meant. He meant something much harder to accept. The obstacle itself is neutral. It has no power until you assign it power. A delayed flight is just a delayed flight until you decide it ruins your day. A rude comment is just sound waves until you decide it defines how you feel for the next 6 hours. Marcus wasn't talking about positivity. He was talking about control, about the brutal, uncomfortable truth that the event and your suffering over the event are two completely separate things, and you've been treating them like one thing your entire life. Think about the last time something went wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, just normal wrong. Someone cancelled on you last minute. Your car wouldn't start. A message came through that put a knot in your stomach before you'd even finished reading it. What actually happened in that moment? Something occurred, and then your mind almost instantly attached a story to it. The story is what hurt you, not the thing itself. Marcus understood this because he had no choice but to understand it. He was the most powerful man alive, and powerful men don't get to control outcomes any more than the rest of us do. Wars happened anyway. Betrayals happened anyway. People he trusted disappointed him anyway. The throne gave him authority over an empire and zero authority over reality bending to his preference. So he trained himself to ask a different question. Not, how do I stop bad things from happening, but what does this bad thing actually require of me right now? That single shift, from controlling outcomes to controlling response, is the entire foundation of everything Stoicism ever built. It sounds simple when you say it out loud. It is brutally difficult to live. Here's where it gets practical. The next time something knocks you off balance, don't ask, why is this happening to me? That question has no useful answer, and it keeps you stuck in the role of a victim staring at a closed door. Ask instead, what is this asking of me? That question has an answer every single time. Patience, honesty, a harder conversation you've been avoiding, a boundary you haven't set. The obstacle isn't blocking your path, it's revealing exactly where you need to grow. And most people never see that because they're too busy resenting the obstacle to look at what it's showing them. This is not about pretending hard things don't hurt. Marcus never pretended that. He grieved. He got frustrated. He wrote pages venting about people who annoyed him, about how hard it was to get out of bed some mornings, about how tiring people could be. He was not some emotionless statue. He felt everything a normal man feels. The difference is what he did with it afterward. He didn't let the feeling make his decisions for him. He let himself feel it, and then he asked the only question that ever actually moves you forward. What now? Not what happened, not whose fault is it, not why me, what now? Every obstacle you will ever face in your entire life is going to ask you that exact same question, whether you're ready for it or not. The people who build something real with their lives are not the ones who avoided obstacles. They're the ones who stopped asking why and started asking what now, faster than everyone else around them. That's lesson 1. And it's only the beginning of what this man figured out alone, in the dark, with no one watching. Lesson 2. Everyone around you is going to disappoint you. That's not a tragedy. That's a fact you need to accept before it ruins your day. Marcus wrote himself a note before he even left his house in the morning. He reminded himself that today he would meet people who were ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, jealous, and difficult. Not might meet, would meet. He treated it as a guarantee, the same way you'd plan for rain because the forecast said rain. Now think about how differently you move through your day compared to that. You wake up expecting things to go smoothly. You expect the co-worker to respond professionally. You expect the driver to use their blinker. You expect the person you trusted to actually follow through. And when they don't, which is often, you feel blindsided. You feel personally wronged. You spend your energy being shocked by something that statistically happens to you almost every single day. Marcus removed the shock completely. Not because he was cynical or because he hated people. He genuinely loved the people in his life, deeply, by every account we have. But he separated two things that most people never separate: loving people and expecting them to behave perfectly. He expected imperfection. He planned for it the way you'd pack an umbrella. And when it showed up, it didn't shake him because he'd already decided in advance that it was coming. This single shift removes an enormous amount of suffering from your life, and almost nobody talks about it because it sounds harsh on the surface. It isn't harsh, it's honest. People are going to be late. People are going to misunderstand you. People are going to choose themselves over you in moments you didn't see coming. That's not a flaw in the universe. That's just what people, including you, have always done and will always do. Here's the part that actually changes how you live, though. Marcus didn't use this awareness as an excuse to withdraw from people or trust no one. He used it as armor, not as a wall. There's a difference. A wall keeps everyone out. Armor lets you walk straight into difficult situations and difficult people without being destroyed by their behavior. He wrote that it's possible for someone to wrong you and for that to be entirely on them, and for you to remain exactly who you were before it happened. The wrongdoing doesn't have to become your wound. You get to decide that separately. Think about how much weight you're carrying right now from people who don't even think about you anymore. The friend who said something careless 3 years ago, the boss who took credit for your work and never acknowledged it, the family member who let you down at the one moment you needed them most. You've replayed those moments more times than they have. You've given them rent-free space in your head for years, while they've moved on completely unaware that they're still costing you peace. Marcus would say you're suffering twice for something that only happened once. The discipline here isn't pretending you don't notice when people fail you. It's noticing clearly, calling it what it is, and then refusing to let it define the rest of your day, your week, or your decade. You can acknowledge someone treated you badly without building a permanent monument to it inside your own mind. There's something else buried in this lesson that most people skip past too fast. Marcus also turned this same lens on himself. He wasn't only preparing for other people's flaws. He was constantly checking his own behavior, asking whether he was the difficult one in someone else's morning, whether he was the person someone else had to brace for. That kind of honesty takes real courage, because it's far easier to catalogue everyone else's failures than to examine your own. So here's the practical version of this lesson. Expect friction today. Expect at least one person to fall short of how you'd want them to act. When it happens, don't act shocked because you already knew it was coming. Feel it if you need to feel it. Then ask yourself the same question Marcus kept asking. Did this change who I am, or did I just let it? Most of the time, when you're honest, the answer is that nothing was actually taken from you, except the peace you handed over voluntarily. That's lesson 2. The empire didn't run on Marcus expecting perfection from anyone. It ran on a man who expected difficulty and built himself strong enough to walk through it without losing himself in the process. Lesson 3. You are going to die. Not eventually, not someday, not in the abstract way you've trained yourself to think about it. You are going to die, and you don't know when. And that fact is the single most useful tool Marcus Aurelius ever picked up. He kept death close, not in a morbid way, not in a way that made him fearful or paralyzed. He kept it close the way a craftsman keeps his sharpest tool within reach, because he understood something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Death isn't the enemy of a good life. Forgetting about death is. He wrote that you could leave this life right now. Let that decide what you do and say and think, not as a threat, as clarity, as the cleanest filter available for cutting through everything that doesn't actually matter. Think about how much of your day gets eaten by things that would feel completely irrelevant if you knew your time was short. The argument you're rehearsing in your head from 3 days ago, the opinion of someone whose name you'll forget caring about in a year, the version of your life you're performing for people who aren't even paying attention. Marcus understood that most human suffering isn't caused by real problems. It's caused by attention spent on things that don't deserve it, while the actual minutes of an actual life quietly run out in the background. He wasn't writing this from a place of comfort either. He lived through one of the worst plagues in Roman history. People around him died constantly, suddenly, without warning. Soldiers he commanded didn't come home. He buried his own children, more than one. This wasn't philosophy as an academic exercise for him. Death was a daily visitor in his actual life, and instead of looking away from it, he made himself look directly at it until it stopped having power over him. That's the part most people get backwards. They think acknowledging death is supposed to be depressing. Marcus found the opposite to be true. Looking honestly at how short and uncertain life is didn't make him hopeless. It made him urgent. It made him present. It stripped away his patience for wasting time on things that didn't matter and gave him an intensity for things that did. Here's the practical weight of this lesson. If you knew with certainty that you had 1 year left, what would you stop doing immediately? What conversation would you finally have? What apology would you finally give or finally demand? What work would you finally start instead of endlessly planning to start? Most people can answer that question instantly when you ask it, which tells you something important. You already know what matters. You're just choosing every single day to act like you have infinite time to get to it. You don't. Nobody does. Marcus didn't either, and he was the most powerful man on earth at the time. Power didn't buy him more time. Title didn't buy him more time. All the armies and wealth and authority in the world couldn't add a single extra day to his life, and he knew it, which is exactly why he refused to waste the days he did have on pettiness, on resentment, on chasing approval from people whose opinions wouldn't matter to him on his deathbed. This isn't a call to live recklessly or to abandon responsibility because nothing matters. It's the opposite. It's a call to take your actual responsibilities more seriously because you finally understand they're not permanent fixtures you can return to whenever you feel like it. The people you love are not guaranteed to be there next year. Your health is not guaranteed to hold. The work you keep postponing is not guaranteed to wait for a more convenient version of you that never actually arrives. Marcus didn't fear death. He used it. He let it strip away everything fake about how he was living so that what remained was real. That's lesson 3, not a warning, a tool. Pick it up and watch how fast your priorities sort themselves out. Lesson 4, your mind is the only territory you actually govern, and most people never bother to rule it. They let it run wild while they spend their whole lives trying to control everything outside of it instead. Marcus wrote one of the most repeated lines in the entire book, and almost everyone who quotes it still misses the weight of it. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Read that again, slower this time. Not you have power over your circumstances. Not you have power over how people treat you. Your mind. That's it. That's the entire territory you were ever actually given to rule. And somehow, it's the one place most people give up control first. Think about how you actually spend your mental energy on an average day. Replaying a comment someone made, predicting an argument that hasn't happened yet, rehearsing a version of events that already happened and can't be changed, worrying about an outcome that's entirely out of your hands the moment you finish worrying about it. None of that is happening to you from the outside. You are doing that to yourself, voluntarily, over and over, and calling it normal because everyone else is doing it too. Marcus didn't have the luxury of pretending his external world was calm. War on multiple fronts. A wife and children he loved and worried about constantly. A Senate full of people maneuvering against him. A body that was sick for most of his adult life, in real, documented physical pain on a near constant basis. If anyone had an excuse to let his external circumstances dictate his internal state, it was him. He didn't take the excuse. He kept returning to the same discipline. The world outside your mind is not yours to command. The weather doesn't ask your permission. Other people don't ask your permission. Outcomes don't ask your permission. But your interpretation, your judgment, the meaning you assign to what happens, that part never leaves your hands unless you hand it over yourself. Here's where this becomes uncomfortable instead of just inspirational. Most people, if they're honest, hand it over constantly. They let a stranger's comment ruin their morning. They let traffic decide their mood for the entire afternoon. They let one piece of bad news color every interaction they have for the rest of the day, infecting conversations with people who had absolutely nothing to do with the original problem. That's not the world controlling you. That's you choosing again and again, often without realizing you're choosing at all, to let your internal state be hostage to whatever happens externally. Marcus trained himself out of that pattern through a practice that sounds almost too simple to work. He paused before reacting. Not for show, not as a performance of calmness, genuinely paused. Long enough to ask whether the thing in front of him actually deserved the reaction his body wanted to give it automatically. Most things didn't. Most things, when you actually stop and look at them honestly, are not worth the emotional rent you're about to pay for them. This doesn't mean suppressing what you feel. He never advocated for that, and pretending otherwise misunderstands the entire philosophy. It means noticing the gap between what happened and how you're about to respond, and choosing to walk through that gap deliberately instead of getting dragged through it. That gap is where your entire life actually gets decided. Not in the big dramatic moments everyone assumes matter most, but in thousands of small, unremarkable seconds, where you either reclaim your mind or hand it away for free to something that didn't earn it and won't even remember taking it. Here's the practical version. The next time something pulls at you, a comment, a delay, a disappointment, ask yourself one direct question before you respond. Is this happening to my mind, or is this happening outside it? If it's outside it, you don't actually have to suffer over it. You can act, you can adjust, you can solve it. But the suffering part is optional, and it's been optional this entire time. Marcus ruled an empire that stretched across 3 continents, and he still considered the territory inside his own skull the only kingdom that genuinely mattered. That's lesson 4. Govern that, and everything else becomes manageable. Ignore it, and nothing else you control will ever feel like enough. Lesson 5. The work itself is the reward. Stop waiting for the applause that may never come, because Marcus never got it either, and he ran an entire empire anyway. He wrote something that should bother you a little when you actually sit with it. He said to do what needs doing, the way nature requires it, without caring whether you're noticed for it. Not because recognition is wrong to want, because needing it puts your peace in someone else's hands, and that's a deal that never ends well for you. Think about how much of what you do during a normal week is secretly performed for an audience. The extra effort you put into a task because you imagine someone noticing it later. The way you frame a story about your day to make it sound a little more impressive than it actually was. the quiet disappointment when something you worked hard on goes unacknowledged. None of that is shameful, it's human. But Marcus noticed something underneath it that most people never examine closely enough. If your effort depends on being seen, your effort is conditional, and conditional effort collapses the moment nobody's watching. He held the highest position a person could hold in his world, and even he understood that most of his real work happened when no one would ever know about it. Reading reports late into the night, making decisions that would never be publicly credited to him, holding his composure in rooms where the only audience was himself and his own conscience. There was no crowd cheering for the version of him that did the quiet, unremarkable, necessary work day after day. He did it anyway because he'd built his sense of worth on something sturdier than applause. Here's the part that hits harder than it should. Most people are operating on a kind of invisible contract with the world, where they expect that hard work eventually gets seen, gets rewarded, gets acknowledged in some satisfying, proportional way. And when that doesn't happen, which is often, they feel cheated. They start resenting the work itself, not because the work changed, but because the imagined payoff never showed up. Marcus broke that contract on purpose. He treated the work as complete the moment it was done well, regardless of who noticed. Not because outcomes don't matter, but because outsourcing your sense of completion to other people's attention is one of the most reliable ways to feel empty, no matter how much you actually accomplish. This shows up everywhere once you start looking for it. The parent who shows up every single day for a child who won't understand the sacrifice for another 20 years. The person doing the unglamorous version of discipline, the early mornings, the difficult conversations, the slow improvement nobody's tracking but them. None of that gets a standing ovation. It gets done anyway, because the doing itself was always supposed to be the point. Ask yourself honestly, how much of your motivation right now is borrowed from imagining other people's reactions? If the answer is most of it, that's not a personal failure. That's just how most people are wired by default. But it's worth noticing because it means your piece currently has someone else's hands on the wheel. Here's the practical shift. Before you start something difficult today, ask yourself whether you'd still do it fully, completely, with the same effort if absolutely nobody ever found out you did it. If the answer is yes, you're doing it for the right reason, and you'll be able to sustain it for years, because it doesn't depend on anything outside your control. If the answer is no, that's not necessarily wrong, but it's worth knowing because that kind of motivation runs out the moment the audience looks away. Marcus governed the most powerful empire on earth without ever needing the empire to tell him he mattered. He'd already settled that question with himself long before anyone else weighed in. That's lesson 5. Do the work like no one's watching, and you'll find you can keep doing it long after everyone else has stopped. Lesson 6. Anger feels like power in the moment it happens, and that feeling is lying to you. Marcus understood this better than almost anyone who's ever held real authority, because he had every excuse and every opportunity to rule through anger, and he refused to do it. He wrote that when you're angry at someone, you should remember that you're angry at a piece of yourself too, because that person is connected to you in ways you've forgotten in the heat of the moment. That's not a soft sentiment. It's a strategic insight about what anger actually costs the person feeling it. Think about the last time you got genuinely angry at someone. In the moment, it probably felt like strength. Your voice got louder or sharper. Your thoughts moved fast. You felt completely justified, maybe even righteous. That's the trick anger plays on you. It dresses itself up as power while it's actually doing the opposite. It's hijacking your judgment, narrowing your thinking, and handing total control of your next few minutes, sometimes your next few days, to whatever triggered it in the first place. Marcus called this exactly what it was. He said that nothing is as damaging to the mind as the unrestrained passion of anger, because in that state, you've forfeited the one thing that actually matters, your reason, the thing that separates a considered response from a regretted one. He had every reason to rule through rage. He commanded armies. He had power over life and death for millions of people. Nobody would have questioned him for losing his temper, for punishing harshly, for letting frustration dictate his decisions. That option was always available to him, every single day, and he turned it down, consistently, for decades. Because he understood something most people in power never figure out. The angrier you get, the less control you actually have, even while it feels like the opposite is true. Here's where this becomes personal instead of historical. You don't run an empire, but you run your own day, your own relationships, your own reactions, and the same trap is waiting for you in smaller versions constantly. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Someone disrespects you in a conversation. Someone fails to do something they promised. In that exact moment, anger feels like the correct, deserved, justified response. It rarely is the useful one. Marcus didn't suppress anger by pretending he didn't feel it. That's a common misunderstanding of what he was actually doing. He felt the spike the same as anyone. The discipline wasn't in not feeling it. The discipline was in the half second after feeling it, where he chose not to hand the wheel over to it. He kept coming back to a question that's brutally effective once you start using it yourself. Is this worth what it's about to cost me? Not whether the other person deserves your anger. They might. That's not the question. The question is whether spending your peace, your clarity, your next hour, or your next relationship on this particular moment is actually a good trade. Most of the time, when you're honest about it, it isn't. This isn't about becoming passive or letting people walk over you. Marcus held boundaries. He made hard decisions. He disciplined people when discipline was genuinely required. The difference is, he did it from a place of clear judgment, not from a place of reactive heat. And those two things produce completely different outcomes, even when the action looks similar from the outside. A decision made in anger and a decision made in clarity can look identical on the surface and still be worlds apart in what they cost you afterward. Here's the practical version of this lesson. The next time you feel that spike, the tightness in your chest, the heat behind your eyes, don't trust the first version of yourself that shows up in that moment. Wait, not forever, just long enough for the wave to pass and your actual judgment to come back online. Then decide. You'll almost always decide something wiser, and you'll keep every ounce of power that anger was about to spend on your behalf without asking you first. That's lesson 6. The calmest person in the room was never the weakest one. He was usually the one actually in control. Lesson 7. You don't need more time. You need to stop wasting the time you've already been given, pretending you're someone other than who you actually are right now. Marcus wrote something near the end of his life that cuts deeper the older you get. He said, "Stop drifting. Stop waiting for some future version of yourself to finally start living the way you know you should." He wasn't talking to a younger man with decades ahead of him. He was talking to himself, an emperor near the end, reminding himself that the man he kept promising to become someday needed to show up today, because someday isn't a real place anyone ever actually arrives at. Think about how many versions of your future self you've already created in your head. The one who finally starts the project, the one who finally has the difficult conversation, the one who finally builds the discipline, fixes the relationship, takes the risk. That person feels so real, so close, so inevitable that you keep handing today over to them, certain they'll show up eventually and do the work you're avoiding right now. They won't. Not because you're weak, because that version of you doesn't exist yet. And the only way they ever come into existence is if the current version of you, the one reading this right now, with all your tiredness and doubt and imperfect circumstances, decides to act instead of waiting to feel ready. Marcus didn't write Meditations as a finished, enlightened man handing down wisdom from some peaceful mountaintop. He wrote it in the middle of the mess, in military camps, during a plague, while grieving children he'd buried, while dealing with people who betrayed him. He wasn't waiting for ideal conditions to start becoming who he wanted to be. He used the actual conditions in front of him every single time, because those were the only conditions he was ever going to get. That's the part almost everyone gets backwards. They think discipline, change, growth, all of it requires the right moment to begin. More energy, more clarity, less stress, a cleaner slate. Marcus never had a clean slate. He had wars and sickness and grief and pressure from every direction, and he built the most quoted philosophical work in human history out of exactly that mess, not after it cleared up. Here's the uncomfortable truth underneath this lesson. You already know what you'd do if you stopped waiting. You know which conversation needs to happen. You know which habit needs to start today instead of Monday. You know which relationship needs honesty instead of more silence. You've known for a while. The waiting was never really about readiness. It was about avoiding the discomfort of starting before you felt prepared enough to guarantee it would go well. Nothing ever guarantees that. Marcus didn't get guarantees either. He got a single uncertain day at a time, the same as you, and he decided that uncertain day was still worth showing up fully for. Here's the practical close to everything we've covered. Stop drifting through your own life, waiting for a more convenient version of it to arrive. The obstacle in front of you, the people who will disappoint you, the time you don't have unlimited amounts of, the mind that's the only territory you actually rule, the work you do without applause, the anger that costs more than it gives, all of it is happening now, in this exact ordinary day, not in some better day you're still waiting on. Marcus ruled the most powerful empire on earth and still had to remind himself of every single one of these lessons, over and over, his entire life. He never fully arrived either. He just kept returning to the discipline, every day, the same as you're going to have to. That's the real takeaway underneath all 7 lessons. This was never about becoming a finished, perfect, unshakable person. It was about choosing, today, and then again tomorrow, to show up as the version of yourself that actually does the work, instead of the version that keeps promising to. If even one of these 7 lessons gave you something to carry into the rest of your week, that's exactly what this channel exists for. Stoic Origin breaks this kind of thinking down every single week, so if you want more of it, you already know what to do. Hit like on this one, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one.